Oh, so we have another creative spin on the King Arthur lore. I'm genuinely curious how many interpretations we've had. Well, at least this one's doing something different. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to the channel. On this channel, we like to talk about the brand new streaming movies and shows, and this weekend's show is Cursed. This is a non-spoiler review. I need your comments down below. Were you excited for this? Are you a fan of the King Arthur lore? And do you think it looks cool? So a teenage sorceress named Nimue encounters a young Arthur on his quest to find a powerful and ancient sword. Created by Frank Miller, of all individuals, based on the graphic novel, and that's where we're going to start with this show, is it very much has a graphic novel style to it, whether we're talking about the interesting and somewhat fun transitions from scene to scene. The cool intro, I liked the music that played in, the over-the-top blood splatter at times that you see even hit the screen when they're in the midst of battle. I found all of those elements to be cool, and even though I haven't read the graphic novel, I've heard decent things about it. Now, Katherine Langford is an interesting person to cast in this role. One, because they're kind of sticking within the Netflix boundaries for a lot of these characters. We see similar faces pop up from a show like Ozark, but Katherine Langford, she has to have the charisma to sell this character and to allow us to gravitate more towards her as we go along. And from an acting standpoint, I'll say she does a really solid job. My issues lie more within the writing for her character and what we didn't get from season 1, and I won't dive too deep, but we'll talk about that here more in just a second. But the acting, I think, as a whole was solid within this show. Now, I do feel as if some of the characters were maybe a bit over the top at times, focusing more on the villainous names. I loved Merlin. I thought Gustav Skarsgård was really good in the role, and Arthur was a really interesting character, and I loved the build-up, how we got his past a little bit, and joining forces, all of these characters that we grow to love against this evil is fun, entertaining, albeit a bit familiar, definitely a different style for this show, for sure, but Cursed is a show I feel that's going to be a bit more divisive than maybe Netflix intended. And I think the main issue, and I'm trying to approach this from the perspective of someone who isn't biased. Sometimes we tend to be biased, especially when we like these actors. I really enjoy Katherine Langford and this cast as a whole, and I like Frank Miller a lot. I like his style. So all of these things coming together should add up to an interesting and well-fleshed-out show. But the issue with season 1 is the fact that it doesn't quite capture the tone that it needs to capture here. I don't necessarily know who the audience is intended to be for this show, because at points, and I'll try to be as detailed as possible here, at points it feels like it's a show meant for the YA audience, or even younger when we get into some of the comic relief that didn't quite land, or certain characters that felt so over-exaggerated. It's almost like something you'd see in a show only dedicated for kids, right? But then at other points, there is blood and gore and cursing and individuals' heads being chopped off and everything you expect from a graphic novel coming from Frank Miller. So almost a bit of an identity crisis for Cursed within the first season. Now, does it set up the potential and possibilities for a season 2, where they're going, especially when it comes to the ending, that I'm not going to dive into in this video. If you'd like to see a separate video, let me know. But I do believe there's a lot of potential here. So let's talk about what worked for season 1. I mentioned the cast already. I feel as if the production value was extremely solid. Now, there were moments in certain episodes where it felt very much like it was being filmed on a soundstage instead of what we get throughout most of the show, which are these grand-scale sets, and we're filming on location. It looks beautiful, and it doesn't impede on what I enjoyed about the show in a huge sense, but I just noticed there were times when the quality shifted a bit, both with that and the CGI. It looks good over here. Maybe over here it looks a bit more cartoonish, but you could also argue that the style of the show with these transitions, with these interesting graphics, was going for something that maybe wasn't 100% grounded, and that's okay if you look at it from that perspective. So I think a lot of individuals are going to find fun within the action. There are some grand scale action scenes that were awesome. The moment that stood out for me, and really, I would even say the turning point of the season, because the first few episodes, I'm like, okay, it's a bit up and down for me. I like some of the characters. I don't know if this is going to pay off because I've seen this before and I've seen it done differently, maybe even better at times. In episode 4, there's an action scene with Nimue in a lake, and it turns bloody extremely fast, and we get to see her really show her stuff, and that's when the show started to kind of steer more away from what they were doing with the younger tone and sticking more to the adult stuff. And again, I don't mind if you're one or the other, but you have to be one or the other. And that is my biggest and most clear flaw with this show, is the fact that it's 50-50 throughout most of the show, but when you get into the latter portion of the season, and that's why I'm so kind of anticipating season 2, it's like you finally found what you were going for and you stuck to it more so than you did within those first few episodes. And again, I know it doesn't matter what the tone is. This show is going to have its fans because you love Katherine Langford going in. You love some of these actors going in. You're a fan of the graphic novel. Whatever it does here, as long as it's entertaining, I'm going to enjoy it. And if you have that mentality, that's okay. Listen, this is a fun watch for sure. There are extremely fun moments if you love this time period, if you love these fantastical types of characters. A lot are going to compare it to something like The Witcher. I don't think it quite lives up to that in terms of quality. But again, that's a more adult tone. That's more of what I want from a show. This show has a mixture, and it is much more so for kids than something like The Witcher. And when I say there are gory and bloody scenes, there are some terrifying sequences here, and I'm like, it feels YA, but then you're giving me something like this, some clear body horror where they're utilizing practical effects. And granted, those practical effects are really good. Some prosthetics here that looked astounding, and I was so happy that Netflix stuck with the quality that they normally give their blockbuster shows like this. We've seen it before where the show falls completely flat, but it still looks good. I don't think this show fell completely flat, but take a show that came out last year with similar type situations, steering more clear from the Arthurian legend, but The Letter for the King. That show, in my opinion, very similar to this show, but much more tonally inadequate. I mean, it could not find the right balance at all, but on a technical level, it was pretty solid. I do think they pumped in a bit more money here because CGI-wise, this looks better, but I think Cursed is much more of a series than The Letter for the King that Netflix is going to focus on and say, okay, we've got a big-time star that Netflix audiences are used to, and we have interesting lore based off of a cool graphic novel. All we have to do now is find our story and really stick to our guns once we discover what those are. And I think that's what Season 1 was all about, in my opinion. It's finding what is going to make this show work and allowing the audience to discover what kind of show they want from that. And again, some of these characters are great. I do feel as if there were some character flaws for Nimue. Not what Katherine Langford was giving, because she was giving it her all. I just feel like the writing could have been better to flesh her out in more of a believable way. I loved the character of Merlin, a very different type and take on the character, not what we're used to. That was interesting. Arthur, again, sort of a different spin, but I like the progression. I think Nimue has a possibility of being one of my favorite characters on Netflix. You're just going to have to flesh her out a bit more in Season 2 and round out that character arc much more so. But again, there are cool enough elements here, such as the action scenes, such as the style of the show that I mentioned was extremely cool. The effort that they put into the technical side of things. The story would slow down at points. Pacing is a problem. I also think length is a problem. This was 10 episodes. Granted, I'm binging, so I'm approaching it from a different perspective. I feel as if it could have been 8 because there were 2 or 3 storylines that come to mind right now. I'm just like, yeah, we could have maybe done without those entirely and shortened the season. that would have made it flow a lot better. So let me say this, fans of the YA genre, I'm going to go ahead and recommend this. I do believe all of the actors of note that you're excited to watch and you're hoping they're going to bring it on screen, I feel as if most of those are going to deliver some villains that were over the top, maybe a bit hammy, and some moments that they're not going to please everyone, that's for sure. It's a show that I feel as if it has a lot of potential for the future. It just didn't quite execute for me in season 1, but I'm definitely coming back. I'm sticking around. As for my score, first off, if you guys like this video, if you enjoy these Netflix reviews, be sure to smash that thumbs up button and let me know, are you watching Cursed? Is it a show for you? I'm going a 55% for season 1 of Cursed, but again, it's a show that has a lot of potential for the future, and I'm excited to see what they're able to get from this. Thank you so much again for watching. Stay tuned because we may even talk more about Cursed when it comes to the ending and more Netflix shows and reviews today. I'll see you guys soon.